Good morning. NeoCon, in partnership with AEC Daily, would like to welcome you to the NeoCon 2021 CEU presentation, Better Health by Managing Your Indoor Environment, presented by Dr. Marilyn Black. Thank you all for attending, and we hope that you enjoyed today's presentation. Take it away, Dr. Black.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so my name is Marilyn Black, and I am Vice President and Senior Technical Director of at Underwriters Laboratories, where we are conducting research, discovery research, and sharing our findings and application of that information for the betterment of society and our planet overall. I actually lead a specific group called the Chemical Insights Group that is focused on environmental hazards, in particular, hazards of emerging technologies and products and processes that we use every day and how they may impact our human health. Some of you may know me by my past. I've been around for quite a while and very specifically worked in the field of indoor air quality. A number of years back, I founded a company called Air Quality Sciences that was focused on understanding sick building syndrome and why we were having people get sick in buildings and trying to understand what the causes of that were. And then later on, after we learned that many of the materials and processes that we were using in our indoor environment were the source of the many pollutants that we were finding and causes of a number of the health effects that we were seeing, I founded the Green Guard Environmental Institute as a third-party certifier of low-emitting products so that designers and purchasers could find those products to use in the built environment. And that particular program is still very active today. There are over 100,000, 200,000 products certified in the marketplace now. And you will see that program primarily as Green Guard Gold, which is run by Underwriters Laboratories. In 2012, we actually joined Underwriters Laboratories so that they could operate that third-party certification program and expand their safety paradigm of what it means to be a safe product and safe environment. Kind of one of the technologies that is core to our science are what we call human exposure chambers. And this was something that was developed a number of years ago by Air Quality Sciences, but primarily environmental exposure chambers allow us to study products under realistic conditions and understand what sort of chemicals, particles, toxins might be being released into the indoor environment so that we can manage them and reduce the hazards. So currently at Chemical Insights, we have a laboratory that houses these exposure chambers of different sizes. We have capabilities through our partnership with Underwriters Laboratory that allows us to expand that and look for other particular hazards such as fire hazards, and gives us a lot of capability to study products and the impact of these products on the indoor environment. So as we move ahead for today's particular activity, we will be talking about some of these studies, and you're seeing a few slides of some of those activities, but we'll be talking about some of these studies and what we've learned in our research that we can apply to ensuring that we have safe environments for all. Our particular approach to our what I call discovery research, we're trying to gather information to fill in the unknown gaps. And the way we do that is, first of all, when we believe there's an issue, we convene stakeholders to help us define what those health risks are and what we can do to establish a research agenda to bring data forward to help us resolve the problem. And once we define that research agenda, we conduct the research, we analyze the data, confirm our findings, and then we share our discoveries with all stakeholders. We're very transparent in all the work we do and want to provide that information out so that everyone can use that to the betterment of their initiatives and people overall. A lot of our work leads to the development of standards or guidelines or issuance of best practices for not only the safe commercialization of evolving technologies, but also making sure that we have safe built environments for all. So today we have some specific learning objectives. We're going to kind of talk about the expanded role of the designer, kind of as a pioneer in with today's opportunities. We're going to identify the health effects of chemicals and respirable particles, things that we're finding in our research. We're going to relate this information that we're finding in our research to best practices, especially for reducing chemical exposure. And we're going to connect all of that information for the practices and guidelines that we have available that you can apply on with your day-to-day work in helping us protect building occupants. So what's the agenda? Well, we have four particular areas we're going to talk about. What's really contributing to poor indoor air quality, what the designer's role can be in helping support positive and healthy indoor air quality. And we're going to talk about emerging risk. What are some of today's emerging risks out there that are contributing to poor indoor air quality, and what sort of mitigation strategies do we know now that can help reduce that risk? And then we'll lead to conclusions and what next steps, and answer any questions that you have. So first of all, what is contributing to poor indoor air quality? And the indoor air quality is very complex, but we do know that indoor air pollution is a public health concern. We know that overall 7 million folks on a global basis die from poor air quality in general, and that's both indoor and outdoor air quality. And the effects of poor indoor air quality in particular can be very significant. We've been studying this issue since the early 1990s, as I indicated earlier. We know that poor indoor air quality leads to a lot of ailments, respiratory, irritation, like headaches, nausea, throat irritation. We know it leads to lower productivity in our work environments, higher absenteeism in our work environments, as well as for our students. We know that in the school environments, we're seeing lower test scores, slower learning when there's poor indoor air quality. And last but not least, we know that poor indoor air quality leads to significant medical costs in terms of treating the particular issue. So what are some of the common pollutants? And many of you are probably aware of some of these, but pollutants arise from just about all of the building materials and activities that we have going on in buildings. We have pollutants called VOCs, volatile organic compounds. Those are the volatile chemicals that get in the air that you can easily breathe. Many times they have odors. You can smell them, especially from newer products. VOCs, commonly you'll see them from surfaces, flooring, paints and coatings, furniture, all of the types of materials you see there. And then we have a second category called semi-volatile organics. And these are organic chemicals as well. It's just that they are not as volatile. So they don't end up in the air at the higher concentrations that we typically see VOCs. They are in the air, but they also commonly settle into building dust. And because they settle into building dust, that means that people can get them on their hands because they're on surfaces, et cetera. Your hands go to your mouth, and so you can get ingestion of these. And these are chemicals like flame retardants, phthalates, PFAS, which are per and polyfluoroalkyl type chemicals that you're hearing a lot about these days. And then the third primary category of pollutants are the particles. These are the small particles primarily that end up in the air being released by certain products and activities. Some of those particles can be large, but many of the large ones settle out. It's the small particles that stay in the air for extended periods of time that we are most concerned about from an indoor air quality standpoint. So relative to the pollution that we deal with, We believe that you as a designer have a significant role to play. If I could have the next slide. Oops. Oh, okay. All right, I skipped over a slide and I apologize. So we were talking about pollutants and the particular ones that are there, the VOCs, the semi-volatile organics, the particles, but there are also things like molds and allergens, dust mites, typical molds in general, other biological pollutants like pet allergens and things like that, and carbon monoxide that can also end up in the air. So in general, the indoor air quality is a very complex mixture of all of these together, relative to what's going on. And what are some of the known health effects of that? The VOC exposure definitely can be related to upper respiratory irritation, especially the lungs and pulmonary system. And if they're there in high enough concentrations, they can also affect the central nervous systems. That's why you commonly get headaches and things like that. The semi-volatile organic compounds that we talked about can be related to neurological development and reproductive health issues, and especially for children. Exposure to particles in particular can aggravate existing lung and heart conditions, and long-term exposure to these particles can lead to premature death among folks. Biological contaminants have definitely come into our world, and we've become very aware of them from COVID-19, viruses, flus, as well as the other allergen type contaminants that we were talking about. So as we move on to that discussion, we need to understand how people are actually exposed to these pollutants. And there are three primary routes. You can be exposed to the pollutants from inhaling them. You can be exposed from ingesting them, meaning you primarily get them on your hands and your hands touch your mouth and you get them in your system. And then we have the potential of what we call dermal transfer. So certain chemicals, and flame retardants are one of those, where if you touch a particular product that contains those chemicals, in some cases they can migrate out of the product through your skin and into your system. So one of the things to remember about pollution exposure is the most effective way to control indoor air pollution is to prevent it, and especially prevent the emissions from all of the products in the first place. We do have ways to manage indoor air quality, and there are four basic ways. And if you remember these four basic ways and take approaches to deal with these, you can really reduce the indoor air quality hazards in indoor spaces. First is having proper ventilation and filtration of the air supply coming into the indoor environment. The second is controlling moisture. Ideally, we like to have a relative humidity of about 40 to 60% in buildings. We want to make sure we don't have any uncontrolled water leaks long-term that can lead to mold growth and exposure. Cleaning the building, having a consistent and well-defined process for cleaning. And then the fourth is source control, controlling the sources that you bring into the building. We'll talk about some of these in more depth later. But those are the four primary ways. And what we want to do today in the second part of our course is really understand your role in supporting good indoor air quality, what you can do to help your customers and organizations do the right things to promote good positive indoor air quality and maintain occupant health. COVID-19 has been a difficult time for all of us, but it has allowed us to see the air in ways that we never have before. You know, we've often said if people can't see a contaminant or they can't smell a contaminant, they're not connected to it. But COVID has taught us that it can be present. We can't necessarily see it. We can't necessarily smell it, but it can cause significant harm. So COVID has allowed us to see that, which has really given us an opportunity from the indoor air quality standpoint to understand what we can do as essential advisors and how we can lead and activate and support the health, safety, and well-being for all. A very important goal of the American Society of Interior Designers. So one of the things too I wanted to say today is that, especially right now, there's information everywhere. There are ads, people are being bombarded by sales folks that want you to use this or buy this. And I'd like to leave you with the warning to be very careful. There are a lot of buzzwords out there that are used, like VOC free or kills COVID, or they're all natural products or they're green products, that don't necessarily mean that they're healthy products. So you have to be a smart purchaser and user of these materials and products, and do a little bit of homework to make sure that you're making the good decisions around their selection and use. So today's goal is really to deliver kind of bite-sized, scientific-based practices to support your role as the advisor for good safety and health and good indoor air quality in our built environment. First thing we're going to do is talk about emerging risk. And we've picked out 4 particular emerging risks that we think are very critical in today's environment. The first are biological aerosol transmissions, such as SARS-CoV-2, which led to COVID-19. The second is prolific increased use of cleaners and disinfectants. The third are new and emerging technologies, such as 3D printers. And the fourth is reducing flame retardant exposure. These are some of the significant hazards in the marketplace and have a lot to do with chemicals, particles of concern in the built environment, and also protecting the health of people in the environments. So part 3, we will get into each of those emerging risks and talk about them a little bit more deeply. The first are biological aerosol transmissions, again, like SARS-CoV-2. You have to understand aerosols in order to understand what's going on. Aerosols are very tiny particles or droplets that are suspended in the air. And they exist everywhere. We have all kinds of aerosol droplets in the air at any one time. They can come from natural sources or they can come from man-made sources. Unfortunately, some aerosols are detrimental to human health when they're so small that they can be inhaled and deposited into the respiratory system. We conducted some of the early coronavirus SARS-CoV-2 aerosol studies, where we really wanted to understand how long aerosols could stay in the air. Because if they're in the air, you can be exposed. How long can they be there, and how far can they be transported, and what can that mean? Unfortunately, the dynamics around that particular question are very complex. And the answer to that is based on a lot of different factors. It's not easy. It depends on what the droplet size is, what type of ventilation you have in the space, how rapid the air is moving, how much air is available, what the temperature and the moisture is in that particular air. So aerosols can very fine, what we're concerned about really are the very fine aerosols, and they can stay in the air from a matter of minutes to days. depending on these particular factors. And in today's world, it's hard to have all of the science to go out and measure those factors so that you know what sort of exposure you are getting. But we do know that the very fine aerosols that get in the air can be there for an extended period of time. So what's the best way to deal with that? The best way to deal with that, as well as any indoor contaminant, is to dilute the contaminants with good airflow and good air ventilation that's constantly working. And that's much better than using a disinfectant trying to deactivate or kill a biological aerosol, which is a one-time event. Good ventilation is the key to reduction of the risk. So what are some of the fundamentals of ventilation? Well, first of all, you have to supply clean outdoor air to the space. That means bringing in the outdoor air, filtering it properly with good filtration, making sure that you have the highest MERV rated filter that you can, and then making sure when that air enters into the space that it's effectively being distributed down to the levels where people are, whether they're standing or sitting at a workstation and working, that the air gets down to them and moves around them. If you have those three factors, it really makes a big impact on diluting those contaminants and getting them out of the space and keeping people, the reduction of the risk effective for the people in the space. Also wanted to mention this particular phenomena because some of you may see this going on. There's a lot of use of physical barriers out there in the space, and this is a complex topic because physical barriers in general only serve maybe to stop big droplets that might be coughed out or sneezed. But unfortunately, if those big droplets hit that barrier, they can basically implode and result in many small particles which kind of just go around the barrier. So the use of them would be very, very complex in this particular situation. And in many cases, they may create more harm than good. We know from many studies that the use of high panel systems and office furniture in those types of scenarios reduce ventilation around the people and allow pollutants to increase in quantity. So be very careful with the use of this particular technology. The next technology I'd like to talk about is air cleaning. And a lot of people are using standalone air cleaners in the indoor space, which in many cases can be very good. This is a good supplement to, it doesn't take the place of good ventilation, but it's a good supplement to ventilation. And what do you look for if you want to use air cleaners? Well, first of all, you want to make sure that those air cleaners have been verified by a third-party organization, has a good clean air delivery rate, that it has good HEPA filtration, high efficiency particulate filtration, that it has an activated charcoal filtration opportunity to remove volatile organic chemicals, that the unit can clean a sufficient volume of space, particularly the space that you're in. And you want to make sure that these units do not introduce ozone into the environment. Ozone is a very strong pulmonary irritant, and we do not recommend that any air cleaners be used that introduce ozone into the space. So rule of thumb for air cleaners is that you look for one that has a clean air delivery rate for 2/3 of the volume of the space that you're trying to clean. You know, I've been into schools and places like that where teachers may have a really small air cleaner sitting on a desk, and that's not going to do anything. You've got to have an air cleaner that's really designed for the whole volume of the space. And as I said, rule of thumb, make sure that it's verified to clean 2/3 of that volume. So we've done some studies with air cleaners that there have been a lot of questions about how effective they are. But one of our big studies was actually in Asia, where we studied the health of asthmatic children over a 2-year period. And we found that air cleaner use in their homes could significantly reduce the particulate pollution entering their homes from the everyday activities and the outdoor air. And we saw a remarkable increase in the mechanical airflow and in reduction of inflammation in the respiratory system of these children. So air cleaners can help improve the health of folks in general. So if they're chosen properly, they're a good part of the solution. The second emerging risk that we're going to talk about is the increased use of cleaners and disinfectants. And with COVID-19 exposure to SARS-CoV-2, we've seen the push on using cleaners and disinfectants in indoor environments. Cleaning gives everybody kind of a I feel safe type of scenario. But remember, cleaning is only a one-time event, and cleaning itself can have a negative impact, cleaners in particular, on occupant health, primarily because of their chemical composition. So I'm sure you probably have seen this scenario of fogging of indoor environments with cleaners. Obviously, as you can see, this person is totally suited up with a respiratory protection and body protection. That itself indicates that there's some concern with exposure to chemicals that are being used in that particular scenario. And it's important to remember, and this is something we've learned through the COVID-19, that the risk of catching COVID-19 from a surface is less than 1 in 10,000. So typically, that's not how people are getting it. What we learned is that SARS-CoV-2 is spread primarily by very fine aerosol droplets in the air that people breathe, not from what they touch. Still, that being said, it's wise practice from a cleanliness standpoint to clean frequently touched surfaces such as door handles and bathroom fixtures and things like that. Okay. Now, I'd like to talk a little bit about considerations beyond COVID-19, because there are many, many others, and we don't want to overlook these, because there are diseases like asthma, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease that affect a large number of people on a daily basis. And these are, you can see the stats here. A large number of people are affected. People die annually from these. Asthma still remains one of the most significant chronic diseases among children and is still the leading cause of absenteeism and emergency room visits by children on a daily basis. And those diseases are also caused by the same thing, biological aerosols and chemicals and particles in the air. Now, what are the primary steps for an effective cleaning and disinfecting type of process if those are going to be used? And we do recommend that they be used, but under a controlled fashion. First of all, one of the best things to do is to use HEPA vacuum systems, high efficiency particulate vacuum systems, where you vacuum your floors, your textiles, furniture, using a high efficiency particulate vacuum, that you focus specifically on cleaning the high touch surfaces and countertops and things like that, but only use those cleaners in well ventilated spaces. Make sure you open windows, you have your air ventilation systems on, that you implement routine cleaning programs, that you have a very defined cleaning process. How often are we going to do it? What are we going to do? What are the materials we're going to use? What are the chemicals we're going to use? That you have those defined. So those are used routinely, and you don't want the situation where people are just bringing their chosen product into the room to clean. And you know, we recommend we certainly practice source control. Make sure that the cleaners and things you bring in are approved by EPA's safe product list and have low emitting chemicals, non-toxic chemicals in them. Okay. The third risk we're going to talk about is a new emerging technology. I'm sure you've all seen them, and those are 3D printers. 3D printing is a wonderful technology that provides a lot of creativity, learning opportunities for students. It provides a lot of opportunity for manufacturing in our supply chain world. And we're seeing millions of them being used in our homes, in our offices, in our workspaces, kind of those non-industrial sort of environments. Unfortunately, through our research, what we've learned is that during the operation of these 3D printers, they do generate a complex mixture of airborne particles and volatile organic chemicals that can end up in the air and provide a complex aerosol for people to breathe. And what does that mean? Well, it means they do present a hazard. And in particular, when people stand close to them, they're in a situation where they're close to all of these emissions and have minimal ventilation at the particular time. So they do present a risk. We have found through our research that there are hundreds of different VOCs that are emitting, depending on the type of filament that's being used and what's being printed and the length of time a printer operates. And these chemicals, some of them are irritants, some are carcinogens, meaning they cause cancer, some are odorants with very strong odors that can affect people's health and produce headache and that type of thing. The type of VOCs and levels will depend on the specific printer type as well as the filament in general and the amount of ventilation that's in the space. Now, in addition to the VOCs, the other released by these 3D printers are the very small particles, and these are called ultrafine particles, and they are inhaled into the pulmonary system just like a gas. And because they're so small, they can enter the lungs and the blood system. They can even get into the bloodstream, which means they can make their way through the body and up to the brain. And just about all 3D printers are emitting these ultrafine particles. And to put a little bit of perspective on this particular slide shows you the size of an ultrafine particle on the far right to the size of a human hair or a coarse particle over on the left. So typically you cannot see these particles, but they are there in millions of particle count levels in the air during 3D printing operation. But 3D printing, again, is a great technology. We want to encourage the use of it, but we want to encourage safe use of it. So what are the things you can do in situations where these are being used in the indoor environment? First of all, purchasing. You can have a good purchasing process that defines the 3D printer that you want to purchase, making sure that that 3D printer essentially has been verified to low emission status, and that you know who you're purchasing it from, and that you also specify the right filaments that have been defined by the manufacturer for that particular printer. You want to make sure you locate that printer in the indoor environment in a space where you are getting a lot of good air filtration. You may have local exhaust that can take the exhaust out of the building. You may have just good building ventilation that can mix around it, or you might be able to open a window. And then you just want to limit the exposure opportunity for the people that are there. Keep them away from the operating printer. So those are the best approaches you can use. And from the safety standpoint, we have various control strategies for minimizing the hazards associated, and it's, location, purchasing controls. And beyond that, we can get into more significant engineering controls as we talked about, exhausting printer emissions. Some printer manufacturers now are providing exhaust systems with those printers. And, you know, we can even get down to requiring personal protective equipment if necessary, but obviously we want to avoid that in the non-industrial environments, and we can do that through some of the control processes we've been talking about. So purchasing, and I said select printers and filaments that meet low emission status. There is now a standard in the marketplace. It's an ANSI standard 2904 that defines what a low emitting 3D printer is. It has a list of just under 100 different VOCs and criteria, emission criteria that printer has to meet. And printers can now be verified or certified by third-party organizations to meet that standard. So we say, make sure you consider printers that are being tested to that particular standard and have the verification information. And you can also put that into your purchase specifications. You can consider printers that have the integrated enclosures that have an exhaust system, filtration system. They are available, but only choose them if they've been verified by the manufacturer to work. Now, location, which was the second control strategy, again, making sure that it's put in a place where you have good air, you have an operable door, you have good clean air coming in, that air has good distribution through the space around the printer, and that the printer be located near a window that you can open if that's an opportunity, or potentially with a local exhaust that can exhaust the emissions to the outdoor air. Operation of the printer is extremely important. We want to keep observers away from the operating printers. So some ways to do this are to consider the hours of operation. Some people are actually putting cameras on these so that children in particular or observers can see. They like to get in and see the objects being printed. So you can actually have a camera that people can observe and see that without having to get up close. It's important during operation of these that the surrounding environment is kept clean, and that's cleaning the surfaces with a wet cloth, vacuuming with HEPA filtration, and anyone involved should wash their hands after working with the 3D printer and various filaments, so that you don't get that ingestion type of exposure scenario that we were talking about before, from your hands to your mouth. So what's another emerging risk? And another emerging risk is that we have been focused on is how to achieve both chemical safe, fire safe, upholstered residential furniture. And when we think about it, and a lot of people don't think about fires these days, but we have a significant number of residential fires. And when a death from a residential fire happens, can you guess what the leading item is to first catch fire if there's a flame available? And probably when you're thinking about that, I don't know what you're thinking. You may think bedding, you may think something flammable like gas or some sort of object that may be associated with cooking. But in reality, when the flame is present in a residential home from any source, could be from a candle, could be from an electrical spark or anything like that, the first item to catch fire is upholstered furniture. And we have a lot of upholstered furniture in our residential homes. But it is the first item to catch fire, and it is associated as a leading cause of death from residential fires. So we've studied this particular issue a lot. Many of you might not know this, but typically most people have less than 5 minutes to exit a residential home once a fire occurs. In reality, that's typically less than 3 minutes nowadays, according to a number of organizations. So we have a fire grows very quickly, and you reach a point called flashover, where essentially that's the point at which a person cannot exist or live in that particular space. So as a result of that, we know over the years that flame retardants in particular have been used to put in our consumer products, not only our residential furniture, and more specifically the polyurethane foam padding, because that is a organic fuel source for fire. That flame retardants have been added to many, many other consumer products in our homes as well, basically to retard or delay the ignition of a fire. But we've learned through the years that flame retardants can have significant impact on human health, and that people can get them through inhaling them, through ingesting them, or you can get them through dermal transfer as well. So we have studied this particular issue very significantly. We wanted to understand how people actually were getting exposed to flame retardants, at what levels were they being exposed to flame retardants, and what could we do to reduce exposure to flame retardants, but yet maintain the fire safety associated with furniture, since it is so flammable. And so we actually studied this over a 5 to 6 year period with various academic institutes, where we manufactured upholstered furniture using different techniques with and without flame retardants, with some of the newer flame retardants called green flame retardants that get absorbed, that are structurally attached in the foam and don't have the ability to bloom out. And then with a technique called a barrier, where instead of using flame retardants, we applied a textile barrier, a flame resistant textile barrier over the foam, and looked at that. So we manufactured furniture using all of those techniques, and then we did burn studies. We simulated use of the furniture, people sitting up and down. We aged furniture to be 10 years old, and we looked at flame retardant exposure, and then we burned this furniture to see how what the burn characteristics were. And that's what some of these slides are showing you. So what we learned a lot from that particular research, and we learned that in general, that flame retardants weren't necessarily necessary. We didn't see much difference in the burns of the furniture if they did or they didn't have flame retardants. And so under that scenario, the question, well, why are we using flame retardants? Okay, well, let's not use flame retardants. But what we learned is that if we weren't going to use flame retardants, we could use a barrier material that had a significant and remarkable impact on the reduction of fire from the burning of upholstered furniture. So this particular video that we're going to show you shows you how a fire barrier is actually installed in residential furniture.
New research has found that use of a fire barrier in upholstered furniture successfully addresses fire safety concerns without the use of chemical flame retardants. So how does a fire barrier get installed on an upholstered chair? Let's take a look. Fire barriers can be made from a variety of inherently flame-resistant fibers, including carbons, polyesters, and fiberglass. These barriers should be soft, pliable, and drape well for optimal results. The process of fabricating the components has two options. First, the barrier can be independently installed, followed by the addition of a cover fabric. Alternatively, the barrier can be laminated to the cover fabric so both are installed together. The fire barrier must fully encapsulate the polyurethane foam or cushion of the chair, which can act as the main fuel source during a fire. The fire barrier is designed to prevent or delay ignition and can successfully reduce the fire growth rate and fire size if ignition does occur. Once installed, the fire barrier will not impact the final look or feel of the upholstered furniture. The fire barrier offers a solution that achieves the convergence of chemical safety, fire safety, and peace of mind.
Okay, so fire barriers are currently available in the marketplace to be used. And what we've learned, taking all the knowledge that we learned from this research and with a strong advisory group from the design, manufacturing, public health stakeholders that were working with us, we produced 2 documents on this research. One is a guidance document on how to manage fire and chemical exposure risk associated with residential upholstered furniture. It gives a little bit of detail into the research and our findings and application of that. And then we took that and created a toolkit specifying residential upholstered furniture to safeguard human health and well-being, specifically for designers and users such as yourself to understand this particular issue and the simple decision process that you can go through to achieve the safety level needed for your particular clients. We had this document reviewed by the American Society of Interior Designers, their advocate for design council, and we were very appreciative of that. But these are readily available for you to use, and we encourage that because we do know that we can have both fire safe, chemical safe furniture, and we are strong advocates for that based on the fire risks that we still see today and the number of deaths. Even though the number of residential fires have gone down in the United States, the number of deaths have increased, and the fires are just much more significant because of the homes that are built today and the number of synthetic materials that we find in our homes. So the last emerging risk that I wanted to talk about today was the increase in pollutant exposure from wildfires. This is something that you're all hearing about, the increase of wildfires. And, you know, we're working on kind of what we call WUI, which is the wildland urban interface. It's kind of where the built environment and the natural environment intersect in a particular wildfire scenario. And, you know, a lot of you think about wildfires being primarily on the western part of the United States. But in general, if you look at this particular map, you will see that we are having wildfire incidences all over the United States. And 1/3 of all homes in the United States are located in areas that meet the definition of wildland urban interfaces. So while the frequency of wildfires has decreased over time, the severity has increased. They're burning hotter, they're burning more acreage, and we are very much in a reactionary mode on this particular issue. But we need to give a lot of consideration to protecting the health and safety of building occupants in these particular areas and managing the impact of our structures, both on the health of the occupants and the impact of those structures on the natural resources if they do burn, because they can be sources of pollution that are introduced into our environment. So wildfires, there are a lot of chemicals of concern related to wildfires. During the fire itself, there are a lot of emissions end up in the air, which are particles, chemicals, reactive species. And then when structures get involved, we have secondary exposures. We have all of the chemicals we've been talking about, like flame retardants and PFAS and phthalates and things like that, that become exposures, and not only to people that may re-enter a home after it's burned to some degree but still usable, or if structures burn down, then all of those chemicals are there to enter the soil and our groundwater and that type of thing. So there is a lot of concern about this particular issue. we've been working on various aspects of this, and one, because there are so many wildfires in a number of areas, a lot of people were reverting to using a very simple air filtration device called a box fan, where they were taking fans and adding a filter on it to filter out the particulates that were coming into their homes. And that's because many people could not afford going out and buying a $200 or $300 air cleaner, and also because they, in many cases, in some environments, they just weren't available. The supply wasn't significant enough to for everyone that needed one. So we actually did a study looking at these box fans just to make sure that if they were being used by consumers in particular, that the fan itself was not going to create a safety hazard by catching fire with that extra load by putting a filter on it. And we found that these filters can be effective. We found that it was hard to get them to catch fire, so safety around them was pretty good, but that people need to take certain measures when they're using them to make sure they use them in open spaces and follow the box fan manufacturer's instructions and avoid tripping hazards and things like that. So we do have a report on this if anyone is in a situation where they want to be using box fans as filtration devices that they make themselves. So that particular issue is something we've been studying. And then the other thing I want to come back to the overall fire scenario, because because of the wildfire, because of the severity of fires, the issue that we have in not being able to escape from our homes very quickly, I'd like to revisit how fast flashover can occur, because I think this is something people just don't think about and need to think about. And our homes today are full of synthetic products, you name it, right? I mean, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, grandma's home, we used a lot more natural products, actual woods, cottons, and things like that. And today, many of that has moved to synthetic. And so in grandma's home, maybe we had 30 minutes to get out because flashover occurred very slowly. But in today's synthetic world, we have less than 5 minutes before all those materials catch fire and create not only the hazardous flames and heat, but also toxic smoke that originates from all that burning. And this slide just kind of reiterates that. We know that homes are just full of synthetics overall. You can see all these types of products. And when we're talking about everyday living in our homes, but also when we're talking about wildfires and the growth of that particular risk, we want to think about making these homes more resilient, and what can we do to lower the risk of fire hazards and death if we're in the path of wildland fires. And by doing that, we basically need to reduce the available fuel load, which are all of these synthetics. Okay. Now, the next step is basically just to sum all this up. What are our conclusions? What are our next steps? And, bottom line, everything that we've talked about from all of the risks, the indoor environment is a very complex environment. And we're breathing on an everyday basis a very complex mixture of pollutants that contain chemicals as well as particles. And there are all kind of synergistic reactions or things that may be occurring that we don't know yet. So reduction and prevention, minimization of those of exposure to those pollutants is extremely important. The best advice that we can give you, and the way to manage that: practice the 4 techniques for managing and having good indoor air quality, ventilation, moisture control, cleaning, and very importantly, source control. Okay, so last but not least, I hope that you guys are aware of many of these emerging issues, and we hope that you understand this and that you can be a pioneer in helping us kind of carry carry the message of these emerging risks and what we can do to reduce them, and have those discussions with your clients in a positive way to take the right steps and do the things to reduce exposure and hazard to your health and even death from these particular challenges that we're facing. So, you know, there've been good examples of that, because most of these sorts of controls are not going to be regulated. Regulation is usually a very minimal bar that has to be met. And then there are good examples in the marketplace where things have gone beyond that minimal bar to improve indoor air quality. And one is specifying third-party certified low-emission products. There's no regulation on that, but just about every major product that you see in the marketplace today, from paints to floorings to wall coverings to insulations, you name it, cleaners, have been verified or certified by third-party programs to be low emitting and free of a number of those more severely toxic chemicals. In air cleaning, again, there's not a regulation, but we see people going above the minimal standard and recommending the highest MERV value that they can for the HVAC filters, so that we can filter out those particles and even down to the respirable level. So I guess in closure, at Chemical Insights, we have a number of resources available. We have explainer videos, a lot of handouts on the topics we've been talking about. We have some e-learning modules, guidance documents. We have the toolkits, such as the furniture flammability, flame retardant toolkit, making choices and decisions on that particular topic. And so we encourage you to go to chemicalinsights.org to find all of those tools. You can easily download them. You can email us if you have any other particular needs or questions. So with that, I will open up for any particular questions that you might have.
Hey, Dr. Black, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. We do have a couple of questions that have come in. The first one's from Melanie. So what should we, I guess as interior designers, focus on first when considering fire and chemical safety in our homes, or in the homes that we design?
Well, as we talked about, upholstered furniture is the first item to catch fire if you have a flame coming to your home. So we really need to focus on the upholstered furniture first, and hopefully make sure that we've taken steps to ensure that it is fire and chemical safe.
Great. We have another question from Barbara. You know, as interior designers, we look at a lot of different third-party certification labels. So what do you look for in those labels in terms of chemical and health claims?
Well, there are a lot of programs, certification, verification programs out there, and a lot of little marks you see. And there are a couple of things you watch for. First of all, you want to make sure that you're choosing a certification mark or program that is third party, meaning it is not something that's issued by the manufacturer directly, that it is third party, and that it has a defined standard and verification program that the manufacturer has to go through to verify or certify that particular product.
Great, thank you so much. I think we might be at our time now. So thank you, Dr. Black.
Thank you.
Well, thank you both so much for a great presentation. Dr. Black, that was very informative, and I'm sure everyone really appreciated the information presented today. I would like to also take a moment to thank all of the learners who have taken a little bit of time out of their day to attend this presentation. We hope you enjoyed this presentation and have a wonderful rest of your day.